James Crawford stood in the checkout line at Save More grocery store in Brooklyn, absently scrolling through his phone while the cashier rang up his items. He was reaching for his wallet when he noticed a woman 2 lanes over. She stood at the customer service counter, her back to him, her shoulders hunched in a posture that spoke of defeat. In her hands, she held a gallon of milk. Beside her, clutching her leg, stood a little girl maybe 4 years old, wearing a faded pink dress and shoes that had seen too many days. James couldn't hear what was being said, but he could see the body language, the woman's head shaking, the customer service clerk's apologetic expression, the woman's card being handed back to her. The universal scene of a transaction declined, of not enough money, of that specific kind of shame that comes with having to return necessities. The woman turned to walk back toward the dairy section to return the milk, and that's when James saw her face. She was young, maybe 30, with dark circles under her eyes that told stories of sleepless nights and endless worry. But it was the expression on her face that stopped James cold. Not anger, not self-pity, just tired resignation, the look of someone who'd run out of options and had learned to accept disappointment as normal. The little girl looked up at her mother. "Mommy, no milk?" The woman knelt down, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Not today, baby, but it's okay. We have juice at home." "But you promised," the little girl said, not whining, just stating a fact with the brutal honesty of children. The woman's forced smile crumbled for just a second, revealing the pain underneath before she rebuilt it. "I know, sweetie. Mommy made a mistake, but we'll get milk next week. I promise." She stood up, took her daughter's hand, and walked toward the dairy section to return the milk. The little girl didn't cry or throw a tantrum. She just accepted it, the way children living in poverty learn to accept 100 small disappointments. James watched them go, and something twisted in his chest. A memory, buried deep, surfaced with startling clarity. He was 7 years old again, standing in a grocery store in rural Texas with his mother. She was trying to buy food for the week with $43, carefully counting each item, doing math in her head. At the register, she'd been $12 over. She'd had to put things back: bread, eggs, and milk. Always milk. "We don't really need milk," his mother had said, her voice too bright, too cheerful, trying to protect him from seeing her humiliation. "We can drink water. Water's better for you anyway." But 7-year-old James hadn't known the truth. They needed milk. His mother just couldn't afford it. That memory, 35 years old, hit James like a physical blow. When was the last time he'd thought about that? About what it felt like to be that poor? About his mother's face when she'd had to return food they needed? He'd spent 3 decades climbing out of that poverty, building his company, accumulating wealth beyond anything his 7-year-old self could have imagined. And somewhere along the way, he'd stopped seeing people like the woman returning milk. They'd become background noise in his successful life, easy to walk past, easy to ignore, until now, until this woman who reminded him of his mother, and this little girl who reminded him of himself, made him see something he'd trained himself not to notice. James made a decision, the kind of impulsive, unplanned decision that successful businessmen weren't supposed to make. But this wasn't about business. This was about something else entirely. He abandoned his cart mid-checkout, ignoring the confused cashier, and walked quickly to the customer service counter. The clerk who'd turned away the woman was still there, looking sympathetic but helpless. "Excuse me," James said. "The woman who was just here, the one returning milk, did she have other groceries?" The clerk nodded. "Yeah, about $40 worth. Her card declined for the whole amount. She said she'd come back another day." James pulled out his Black American Express card, ring up her groceries, and add whatever else she might need. Milk, meat, fresh produce, bread, everything a family needs for a week. "I'll cover it." The clerk stared at him. "Sir, I don't know what else she needs." "Then make your best guess," James said. "You work here. You know what families need. Fill a cart with essentials. Good food, healthy food. Nothing expired or about to expire. Real groceries. Charge it to this card. But, sir... Please, James said, and something in his voice made the clerk stop arguing. Just do it. Quickly, before she leaves. 20 minutes later, James stood in the parking lot watching the woman load her original small bag of groceries into an old Honda with a dented bumper and a taped-over taillight. The little girl was already strapped into a car seat in the back, visible through the window. James approached with a shopping cart full of groceries. The cart the clerk had assembled based on his instructions. Milk, fresh vegetables, chicken breasts, rice, pasta, cereal, fruit, peanut butter, bread, everything a family of 2 would need for a week, maybe 2 if stretched carefully. The woman was closing her trunk when she noticed him approaching. Her expression immediately became wary, defensive. A woman alone with a child, approached by a stranger in a parking lot, had every reason to be cautious. "Excuse me," James said, stopping several feet away to give her space. "I was in the store. I saw what happened at the customer service counter. I hope this doesn't offend you, but I'd like to give you these groceries. They're paid for. Please, just take them." The woman stared at the cart, then at James, then back at the cart. Her eyes filled with tears as she blinked back furiously. "I can't accept that. I don't take charity." "It's not charity," James said gently. "It's just one person helping another. Please, let me do this." "Why?" the woman asked, her voice breaking. "You don't know me. Why would you do this?" James thought about how to answer. He could tell her he was a billionaire and this meant nothing to him. He could tell her it was just kindness. But instead, he told her the truth. Because 35 years ago, my mother stood in a grocery store and had to return milk because we couldn't afford it. I was 7 years old, and I remember her face. The shame, the defeat, the way she tried to pretend it was fine when we both knew it wasn't. He paused, emotion thick in his throat. I remember promising myself that when I grew up, I'd never let that happen to anyone if I could help it. And then I got successful and busy, and I forgot. Until I saw you today. You reminded me of my mother. Your daughter reminded me of myself. And I remembered what I promised that 7-year-old kid. So please, take the groceries. Not for you. For me. So I can keep a promise I made a long time ago." The woman's tears spilled over. She covered her face with her hands, shoulders shaking. "I'm trying so hard," she whispered. "I work full-time. I do everything right. But it's never enough. The rent keeps going up. Daycare costs more than I make. I'm drowning and I can't stop it. And I feel like I'm failing my daughter every single day." "What's your name?" James asked softly. "Rachel. Rachel Martinez." "Rachel, you're not failing. You're surviving. You're working full-time and raising a child alone and trying to make it work in a system that's rigged against people like you. That's not failure. That's heroism. Take the groceries. Feed your daughter. And stop feeling ashamed of needing help. We all need help sometimes." Rachel wiped her eyes, looking at the cart full of food. "I don't know how to thank you. You don't have to thank me. Just promise me something. When your daughter grows up, when she's successful and comfortable, make sure she remembers where she came from. Make sure she doesn't forget to help others. That's all the thanks I need." They loaded the groceries into Rachel's car together. The trunk barely held everything. Through the window, the little girl watched with wide eyes, probably not understanding why a stranger was giving them food, but sensing something important was happening. Before Rachel got in her car, she turned to James one more time. "Can I at least know your name? So I can remember who helped us." James hesitated. He could give her his real name, let her Google him, let her see he was a billionaire, and this grand gesture meant nothing financially. But that would change everything, would make it about his wealth instead of about human connection. "My name's James," he said simply. "That's all that matters." Rachel nodded, getting into her car. James watched her drive away. The old Honda with its dented bumper, carrying a mother and daughter and a week's worth of food, and maybe, hopefully, a small restoration of faith that kindness still existed in the world. James couldn't stop thinking about Rachel and her daughter. That night, lying in his mansion that suddenly felt too big and too empty, he kept seeing Rachel's face. The resignation, the shame, the exhaustion of trying so hard and still falling short. The next morning, instead of going to his office, James made some calls. He had resources, connections, ways of finding out things about people. Within 3 hours, he knew Rachel Martinez's full story. Single mother. Her husband had left when their daughter Emily was 6 months old. No child support despite court orders. Rachel worked as an administrative assistant at a dental office, making $38,000 a year before taxes. Her apartment rent was $1,500 a month. Daycare was another $800. She was drowning in debt from her daughter's premature birth 3 years ago, medical bills that insurance hadn't covered. On paper, Rachel was doing everything right, working full-time, paying her taxes, raising her child. But the math just didn't work. In modern America, you could work 40 hours a week and still not earn enough to afford basic necessities. The system was broken, and people like Rachel fell through the cracks every single day. James made more calls. By the end of the day, he'd done things he'd never done before. He'd contacted the dental office where Rachel worked and anonymously donated enough money to give every employee a 20% raise. He'd paid off Rachel's medical debt directly to the hospital. He'd prepaid 6 months of her rent to her landlord with a note saying the tenant was never to know where the money came from. But he didn't stop there, because James realized this wasn't just about one woman, one family. This was about a broken system that created thousands of Rachels, thousands of families one emergency away from disaster. Over the next month, James did something unprecedented in his career. He restructured his entire company's compensation structure, raised minimum wage for all employees to $75,000 a year, implemented free childcare at all company facilities, created an emergency assistance fund for employees facing financial crises. His board of directors thought he'd lost his mind. His CFO warned it would hurt profits. James didn't care. He'd spent 30 years maximizing shareholder value and forgetting about human value. A woman returning milk in a grocery store had reminded him which one actually mattered. 6 months after that night in the grocery store parking lot, James sat in a coffee shop near Rachel's apartment. He'd sent her a letter asking to meet, signing it simply James from the grocery store. He wasn't sure she'd come. Wasn't sure she'd even remember him. But Rachel walked in at exactly 3 o'clock, holding Emily's hand, and her face lit up with recognition. She looked different, less exhausted, less defeated. She wore new clothes, nothing fancy but clean and properly fitting. Emily wore a bright red dress and new shoes, and she skipped beside her mother with the carefree energy of a child who wasn't carrying the weight of her mother's struggles. They sat down together, and Rachel stared at James with an expression he couldn't quite read. "I Googled you," she said finally, "after you left your full name in the letter. James Crawford, Billionaire CEO. I couldn't believe it. I kept thinking maybe it was a different James Crawford. But it's you, isn't it?" James nodded, feeling oddly nervous. "Does that change things?" "It makes me understand why you could afford a cart full of groceries," Rachel said. "But it doesn't explain everything else that happened after." "What do you mean?" Rachel's eyes filled with tears. "My medical debt, it vanished, just disappeared from my credit report with a note saying it had been paid. My rent, my landlord told me someone paid 6 months in advance, and I shouldn't worry about it. My job, we all got raises out of nowhere. 20%. My boss said it was from an anonymous donation." She looked at him directly. "That was you, wasn't it? All of it?" James didn't deny it. "I kept thinking about what you said, about trying so hard and it never being enough. about feeling like you were failing. And I realized you weren't failing. The system was failing you, so I tried to fix what I could. Why? Rachel whispered. Why would you do all that for someone you met once in a parking lot? James thought about how to explain something he was still figuring out himself. Because seeing you return that milk woke me up. I'd spent 30 years climbing out of poverty, building my company, making billions. And somewhere along the way, I forgot what it felt like to struggle. I stopped seeing people like you, like my mother was, like I was. You reminded me. You brought me back to something real. He leaned forward, his voice intense. You know what's funny? I thought I was helping you, but you helped me. You reminded me why I started my company in the first place. Not to get rich, to make a difference, to prove that someone from nowhere could become someone. But I've forgotten the second part, the becoming someone who helps others part. Rachel wiped her tears. You changed my life, James. Emily has new clothes. We have food. I'm not drowning anymore. I can breathe. I can sleep at night without panic attacks about bills. You gave me my life back. You gave me mine back, James replied. You reminded me that money is just a tool. It's what you do with it that matters. I was using it to make more money. You showed me I should be using it to help people. That's worth more than any profit margin. Emily, who'd been coloring quietly at the table, looked up at James with serious brown eyes. Are you my mommy's friend? James smiled at her. I'd like to be, if that's okay with you. You're the grocery store man, Emily said matter-of-factly. The one who brought the milk. Mommy told me about you. Did she? Emily nodded. She said you were an angel. Are you really an angel? James laughed, feeling his chest tighten. No, sweetheart. I'm just a person who remembered what it's like to need help. Just a person trying to be better. Rachel reached across the table and took James's hand. Thank you for everything. For seeing us when we were invisible. For helping when you didn't have to. For remembering your mother and keeping your promise. You saved us. You saved me too, James said truthfully. Sometimes the people we help are the ones who help us most. You reminded me that success without compassion is just expensive emptiness. That being wealthy means nothing if you forget to be human. They sat together in that coffee shop, the billionaire and the single mother and the little girl. 3 people brought together by a gallon of milk and a moment of kindness. James had found something he didn't know he'd lost. Rachel had found hope when she'd run out of it. And Emily had new shoes and the freedom to be a child instead of carrying her mother's worries. 6 months later, James launched the Crawford Family Foundation, dedicated to helping working families who fell through the cracks. Rachel became one of his first employees, using her experience to identify families who needed help and ensuring they got it with dignity and respect. And on the wall of the foundation's office, framed and prominent, hung a photo of a gallon of milk with a simple plaque underneath. Remember what matters? Because sometimes a billionaire sees a single mom returning her daughter's milk, and in that ordinary moment remembers that the distance between poverty and wealth isn't as far as we think, that all of us are one bad day, one missed paycheck, one emergency away from struggling, and that the true measure of success isn't what we accumulate, but who we help when we have the power to make a difference. Sometimes we think we're helping others when really they're helping us remember who we're supposed to be. And sometimes the smallest act of kindness creates ripples that change not just one life, but hundreds, thousands, proving that wealth isn't about what you have. It's about what you do with it, and whether you remember to see the people everyone else walks past. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like this video. It helps us share more beautiful stories like this one. Kindly drop a comment below and tell me where you're watching from. I like to know what part of the world engages with my story. Oh, also, don't forget to subscribe to my channel Deep Cut Stories for more emotional stories about love, kindness, and fate that'll touch your heart deeply. Thank you for watching.